Warning: viewer discretion is advised. Hi friends, welcome to Meals Done Alive For, where we talk about a true crime case and make a death row meal from scratch. I'm your host, Jody Breton, and if you enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe and all of that fun stuff. Today we're going to be covering the case of George Stinney, and I won't lie to you guys, this one was really heavy. I had a hard time getting through everything, so if you guys need to take a break on this one, I totally understand. George Stinney Jr. was born October 21st, 1929 in Pinewood, South Carolina. George's parents were George Stinney Sr. and Amy Brown Stinney. He was the oldest of four. He had a younger brother, Charles, and two sisters, Catherine and Amy. The year was 1944. George was 5 feet 1 inches tall, weighing about 90 pounds, and he was African American. George and his family lived in Alcaloo, South Carolina. Hopefully I'm saying that right. His father worked at a sawmill and the family lived in company housing, which means like they had a house provided to them because his father worked at the sawmill. Alcaloo was known to be a small working class mill town. At this time, Jim Crow laws were still in effect, meaning there was still segregation across the board, and white and black communities were separated by the railroad tracks in Alcaloo. On March 22, 1944, two little girls, Betty June Binnicker, aged 12, and Emma Thames, aged 7, didn't come home that night, so a search for the girls ensued. It was said that over 100 people were looking for the girls. George Stinney Sr. helped in the search, but they didn't find the girls that night. The very next day, on March 23, 1944, Reverend Francis Batson found the girls murdered in a ditch on the African American side of town. The girls had been beaten with a weapon, and both of them suffered severe blunt force trauma, resulting in penetration of both of their skulls. The medical examiner reported no evidence of sexual assault to the younger girl Emma, but Betty's genitalia was bruised, so it was inconclusive if she had been assaulted or not. The day the girls went missing, they were last seen by Amy and George Jr. They were riding their bikes by the Stinney's house. They asked the two Stinney kids if they had seen any maypops. And for those that don't know, maypops are also known as passion flowers. According to Amy, George's sister, he was with her the entire time. By March 24th, 1944, the sheriff announced the arrest of George Jr. and stated that the boy had confessed and led officers to a hidden piece of iron. Following George's arrest, he was not allowed to see his parents until after his trial and conviction. And when I read that part of this case, that one really got to me because, I'm a mom, for those that don't know, and I can't imagine my children being accused of something and not being there for any interviews, their trial, their sentencing, none of it. They got to see George one time after his conviction, so that just broke my heart to begin with. According to a handwritten statement, his arresting officer, H.S. Newman, a Clarendon County deputy, stated, "I arrested a boy by the name of George Stinney. He then made a confession and told me where to find a piece of iron, about 15 inches where he said he put it in a ditch about 6 feet from a bicycle." Following Stinney's arrest, his father was fired from his job at the sawmill and they had to immediately leave their home because it was company housing and because they feared for their safety. So remember, their house was provided to them by the sawmill company, so since he was no longer employed there, they had to leave immediately. Not to mention, it was not safe for them. George had no support during his 81 confinement and trial. Stinney was questioned alone without his parents or an attorney. Although the Sixth Amendment guaranteed legal counsel, this wasn't routinely observed until the Supreme Court 1963 ruling in the Gideon v. Wainwright that explicitly required representation through the course of criminal proceedings. So George probably didn't know that he had the right to an attorney, and I'm not sure that it would have even mattered because obviously people are lying and not being truthful throughout this case. And in case some of you guys didn't know, if at any point during an interrogation that you tell police that you want a lawyer, they have to stop interrogating you until you have an attorney present. So please make sure that you know your rights as a human being because clearly innocence is not what exonerates you. Stinney was housed in a jail in Columbia, which was 50 miles from Alcaloo, due to the risk of lynching. A mob did come for George Stinney at the Alcaloo jailhouse, but as we know, he wasn't there. The entire trial, including the jury selection, took place on April 24th, 1944. Stinney's court-appointed counsel was Charles Plowden, a tax commissioner campaigning for a local election. Plowden didn't challenge the 3 police officers who testified that Stinney confessed to the 2 murders, nor did he try to defend Stinney at all. He also didn't try to defend the prosecution's presentation of 2 differing versions of Stinney's confession. In one version, Stinney was attacked by the girls after he tried to help one of them out of a ditch and he killed them in self-defense. In the other version, he followed the girls first, attacking Emma, then Betty. Also, there is no written record of George Stinney's confession apart from Deputy Newman's statement. The prosecution called 3 witnesses, the Reverend who found the girls and the 2 doctors who did the postmortem examinations. Stinney's defense didn't cross-examine witnesses, call any witnesses, or offer any defense. It's safe to say that Plowden was completely useless for everything in this case, and it seemed like he just cared about how people viewed him since he was up for election. The entire trial only lasted a total of 2.5 hours. More than 1,000 white Americans attended the trial. African Americans were not allowed in the courtroom. George's entire jury was all white, and his family couldn't attend because they were in fear for their lives. The jury took less than 10 minutes to deliberate before finding George guilty of murder. Judge Philip H. Stoll sentenced George to death by electrocution. There's a lot of things that I want to say about a lot of people in this case, but I can't say them here, so just use your imagination. There is no transcript of the trial and no appeal was filed by his counsel, so once again, Plowden was useless. George's family, churches, and the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, appealed to Governor Olin D. Johnston for clemency, but he gave none. Governor Olin D. Johnston visited George Stinney in the death house on June 14th, 2 days before he was, it says executed, but I'm going to say murdered because that's what happened. He wrote a response to an appeal stating, "I have just talked with the officer who made the arrest in this case. It may be interesting for you to know that Stinney killed the smaller one just to R-word the larger one. Then he killed the larger girl and R-worded her dead body. 20 minutes later, he returned and attempted to R-word her again, but her body was too cold. All of this he admitted to himself." I personally would bet that that was never said, or at least wasn't willingly said personally. George Stinney was only able to see his parents once after the trial before his execution. Once again, their personal safety was at a great risk. George Stinney was murdered on Friday, June 16th, 1944 at 7:13 a.m. by electric chair. Some people said that he was too short for the chair and they used a Bible as a booster seat. It was also said that the mask slipped off of his face and people could see him crying. This account was contested by a man named Clyde Barnes. He said that they never had him sit on any books and that the mask didn't fall off, but who knows, that I couldn't find which was the correct answer. Stinney was buried in an unmarked grave at the Calvary Baptist Church Cemetery in Lee County, South Carolina. Now let's talk about who could have been the real killer, because not only did they murder a child, but the 2 original little girls that were murdered didn't get justice. George Burke Jr. was a possible suspect in the murder of the two little girls. Burke Jr., I'm going to call him Burke just so that we don't get him mixed up with George Stinney, died a couple years after the murder and allegedly made a deathbed confession. But a lot of people say that that didn't happen, but I'm on the fence of, yeah, he did. George Stinney's mother briefly worked for the Burke family. Stinney's sister recalled that her mother had once come home saying that Burke Sr. had made advances toward her and their father had told her not to go back. Stinney's sister Amy claimed to have heard that the Burke boys framed her brother because their mother didn't want to give it up. Burke Sr. conducted the initial search for the girls and was the landowner of where the girls were found. Because that's not suspicious at all, right? Burke Sr. was also the foreman for the grand jury that indicted Stinney, and he had been accused of helping steer blame off of his son and onto Stinney. It was said that Wayne Burke, the son of Burke Jr., was told by his grandmother that his father picked the girls up in his lumber truck on the day that they were murdered. So just in simpler terms, Burke Jr. picked up the girls in his lumber truck. Stinney's sister had previously recalled that after the girls asked about the Maypops, that a lumber truck drove down after them. In 1995, Stinney's 7th grade teacher, W.L. Hamilton, spoke in an interview with the Sumter Item about George. He said, "I remember the day he killed those children. He got into a fight with a girl at school who was his neighbor. In those days, you didn't have to worry about children carrying pew-pews and knives to school. But George carried a little knife and he scratched the child with his knife. I took him outside and we went for a little walk, and I talked to him. We went back into the school and in a submissive way, he begged for the child's pardon." Stinney's sister Amy denied these allegations and contacted Hamilton after it was published. Amy stated, "I asked him why he would say anything like that," she said. "He told me that someone paid him to say it. I don't know who paid him, but his exact words were, 'because they paid me.'" Hamilton died shortly after the interview was published. In 2004, a local historian, George Fearsome, started researching the case after reading a newspaper about it. His work gained the attention of South Carolina lawyers Steve McKenzie and Matt Burgess, along with many others. All of these people aided in the research and review of historical documents, witnesses, and evidence to assist in exonerating Stinney. McKenzie and Burgess, who represented the Stinney family, filed a motion for a new trial on October 25th, 2013. New evidence in the court hearing January 2014, including testimony by Stinney's siblings, an affidavit from the Reverend Francis Batson, who found the girls. In his statement, he said there wasn't much blood and felt the girls had been killed elsewhere and moved to the ditch. Wilford Johnny Hunter, who was in prison with Stinney, testified that the teen had been made to confess and maintained his innocence. Rather than approve a new trial on December 16, 2014, Judge Carmen Mullen vacated Stinney's conviction. She ruled that George had not received a fair trial and that he was not effectively defended and his Sixth Amendment rights had been violated. Judge Mullen wrote, "No one can justify a 14-year-old child charged, tried, convicted, and executed in some 80 days. In essence, not much was done for this child when his life lay in the balance." South Carolina did propose a bill in 2022 that was called the George Stinney Fund that stated that if someone was falsely executed, that the family would be awarded $10 million, but I couldn't find the status of the bill, if it was passed or rejected. So if you guys are a law student or you are in South Carolina and you know if the status of the bill, leave a comment down below because I would like to know. I just couldn't find the answer. So for today's last meal, I could not find a documented last meal for George Stinney. So I decided to make a ton of different cookie flavors, and my intention was to donate all of these to my local homeless shelter. But unfortunately, I got snowed in, so I was stuck with all of these cookies, and I am not sending stale food to anybody. So unfortunately, I was not able to do that. I'm just gonna have to remake these at some point and send them off in the name of George Stinney, so I'll have to try again on that. I think my favorite flavor that I made out of these though was a strawberry cheesecake cookie. They were more difficult to make, but I think that they were the yummiest in my opinion. As for the case, I'm sure that you guys know where I stand on everything. I do not believe that George Stinney committed any crime. I think that it was pinned on him, and it just made me really angry that they murdered a child and two other children never got justice for their murders. So it was just incredibly sad. I honestly hope that the people, everyone involved in this case, are paying for the crimes that they committed in aiding in his murder. But again, I can't talk too deeply into that because I will get demonetized. So, anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Hopefully, I'll see you next week, if not on the dissection. Bye, guys.